All right. Yes, let's go live. I think we should do that right about now. Welcome, everybody. This is Unfound Live for June. What is today? The 24th of, coincidentally, 2024. So it's 6/24, 2024. Hope everybody had a great week. Hope everybody had a great weekend. I'm going to tell you just some of the things that have gone on with me since last Monday. I just don't know where I keep saying this, and I know it's repetitive and everything, but I don't know where the time goes. I really don't. But it just keeps on flying by. We're almost into July. And, of course, next week, at least here in the United States, we will be celebrating our independence. Before I go too far into this, I want to remind all of you, while you are watching tonight, I hope you will give this show a thumbs up. If you are not yet a subscriber to this channel, please hit the bottom or the button in the bottom right-hand corner. Share it if you have other true crime people that you think should be tuning in on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. Share that with them. Share the link. And if you'd like to go one step further, why don't you just hit the join button? If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit the join button below and contribute to the work that we do here. What exactly do I have lined up for tonight? Well, that's a very good question. Well, I got some Steve Pankey letters. I admit that I have a bunch of them, but they're a little repetitive, so do not be distracted by the number of them. I'm only going to be able to read a few things off of a few of them because a lot of this is stuff you've heard before, and I'm not doing that. So we got some Pankey letters, portions of Pankey letters that I want to go over. I also, of course, I have to get some things that I didn't get to last week that I think are still relevant. I need to go over this video from this channel, Active Self-Protection Channel, in which a guy is having an interaction with a police officer, and he seems like he's just very casual and everything is okay, and then all of a sudden he loses his mind. I think from a disappearance point of view, we can learn a lot about that. I didn't get the chance to talk about that last week, but I'm certainly going to talk about it tonight. Also want to go in a little deeper into a story from last week with Aidan Clune and the shoes being found. What do you know? I want to talk about Sherri Papini, just when you've all forgotten about her. A story pops up about her. Well, a story about her ex-husband, and he's going on the talk show circuit now. He has a book out, what it was like to live with Sherri. Then a story also I didn't get to last week was this private jet that had been missing for 50 years. It's been found. And then I want to go over these two women who were murdered years ago in the 1990s. And their killer has been identified. He's already dead, but I want to talk about that because I think these two women, in some kind of way, have maybe been connected to the Colonial Parkway murders. No, not the two you're thinking of, Rebecca Dowski and Kathy Thomas. Not them. Two other women who were together, but through DNA, their murder has been caught. Then if I get to it, I want to talk about this guy who has been on the run for some years and is allegedly in Brazil. And I have a question from Jasmine that I'm excited to answer tonight. And I think that Maybe Jennifer. Let's see. Maybe I have another question. Jennifer's just I'm looking for, of course, additional questions. If anybody wants to get in asking me any questions, as I always say, it doesn't have to be true crime related. Is they can be about me or whatever else, music, movies, whatever. Just keep it PG and not too personal. So once again, I hope as you are watching tonight, you will give this show a thumbs up, subscribe, like, share, join. You know what to do. And by the way, if you'd like to contribute while you are watching tonight, this is only available to people who tune actually in on Monday nights. And then once again, if you are using YouTube to watch this show, you can hit, I think they've changed the little super chat button. It's like in green now. And you can see that at the bottom of the chat there. If you'd like to contribute to what we do here, you can do that while the show is happening. All right, just some things that have gone on with me since Cranky99 is saying Caleb Harris was supposedly just found. Wow. Well, all right, maybe then I'll be talking about that tonight because we got a couple hours to go. I'll have to try to check into that while I'm doing the show. Sherri, maybe. Hello, Sherri, by the way. Good to see you. Maybe you can check out and see what that news is, Sherri, exactly for the rest of us. If you could do that, I'd appreciate it. If I have a chance to talk about it before we're done, I will do that. That would be something. Oh, just Sherri, don't trust that source. Okay. Well, maybe you and Cranky99 can have a conversation then about that. Thank you for relaying that to me, Sherri. As for me, what has gone on since last week? I played some really good disc golf on Saturday. It was a welcome change. It was a nice change of pace. And I ended up finishing 5th out of like 39 players or something like that. If you follow me on Facebook, my private page, I posted my scorecard along with some of the top scorecards, the top maybe 8 or 9 players. And it felt really good out there. I putted really, really well. Put it in the basket really well. No bogeys, 8 birdies, no bogeys, which I'll take. Now, granted, we were playing from the short tees, but really that doesn't make that course that much easier. Obviously, when you go for short tees, you're more likely to get birdies, certainly. But still, Cliff Stevens is not a course you want to mess around on because there is water. It was at least a little windy. And so you just can't walk up there and think you're automatically going to play well, no matter if it's from the longs or the shorts. But I summed up for that division. We played for the shorts. That's the way it went. I finished 5th out of, like I said, 35 or 39 players. Felt really good out there. And it really shows that I've been putting, practicing my putting here at home. And in fact, what I've been doing just off to my right, I stand right here, and the basket is way back in that corner by the sliding glass door, which is where the balcony is, and the Gulf of Mexico is out there. But it's about 20 feet. And I've really been practicing my 20-foot putts. And obviously, it's helped. I felt really when I was stepping up to these putts. Now, I did miss a couple putts, maybe a couple I should have maybe hit, maybe. But I made four putts like at 35, 40 feet. So it was pretty nice. Like I said, it was a welcome change. So I felt really good out there. Really knew even when I was done that it was a pretty strong round. Didn't think that it was good enough to win my division, but I knew I would be pretty good up there in the standings. And I'll take 5th out of 39 anytime. I love to win, but if I average 5th out of 39 for the rest of my disc golf career, I'm going to be pretty pleased about that, especially since I've been playing very well recently. And I have been working on a little bit of a new throwing stroke. Really didn't work out maybe that well on Saturday, but still I scored well. And that's really all. It's a sport. You're not out there just throwing. You're playing the game, and the goal is to have a low score. It's not to have perfect form or anything. And I succeeded in scoring well, but still my form does need a little work. And I've kind of been working on that a little bit. Although, like I said, I don't know how much it helped me on Saturday, but practicing my putting certainly helped me on Saturday. So moving on, in other, I guess, sports or trivia news, or sports or game news, my trivia team last Wednesday, there were only 4 of us there. Me, Scott, Mike, and Mike's son Kevin. There were only 4 of us. Now, usually we have like 6 players, 8 players, but last Wednesday we only had 4, and we got a perfect score. We did not miss a question. I think it's the second time my team has done that, but I don't think I was there the last time they did that. I think that the last time occurred in March, and I wasn't there. I was up seeing my dad, and I think they got a perfect score when I was up there. Well, finally, it was nice to be part of this, and still, the season finished. We ended up finishing in second place out of like 20-some teams. And really, I guess if we'd have managed our points and some things a little better, certainly we could have won for the season. There were just to give you an idea, though, of those 12 weeks, I think we won 6 or 7 of them. The problem is on all those other weeks, I think we got 0 because we missed the last question, bet all our points. So when it comes to winning any individual week, we're really good at that. But as far as managing that for an entire season and making good decisions on points and everything, we're maybe a little too aggressive when it comes to that. I think if we had managed the betting of our points a little better, we might have won by 300 or 400 points, but that's not what happened. But we win a lot. And the seasons go in quarters. So I think there were 12 weeks. Like I said, I think we won at least 6 of those weeks. And every week there's like 25 to 30 teams. About 130 people make up those teams. And so to win that much without that many people, those many teams there is really something special. But that's not really unusual. That's what we used to do at Fat Cats for all those years. Many teams would show up, a lot of people, and we would still win. Hey, all I can say for me is there's certainly some categories I know a lot in, but it's certainly, I would tell you, it's as much a team effort as you could ever imagine. It is certainly not just one person who's really, really smart and everybody's kind of like just hanging in there or just hangers on, just showing up and being part of the team. Everybody contributes in their own areas, and it's really, it's cool, and it's amazing. We've been doing this for like 12 years now, winning so much. It's just really crazy. Maybe the rest of the people in Pinellas County just aren't that smart, but I don't think that's it. So we had a perfect score. And this week, the top 5 teams, we are one of those top 5 teams. We're playing for $100 this coming week. So I'm looking forward to that. That will happen on Wednesday evening. And then finally, as far as stuff that's been going on with me, I've been watching a lot of the soccer. I haven't missed too many games yet. Of course, now we have both the Euro Championships going on with all the countries over there, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, England. They're all in that big tournament over there in Europe. And then now they have what they call the Copa America, where teams from North America are playing against teams from South America. So you have the United States, Canada, Mexico, And then Central America too, like Panama, Costa Rica. But then you have Brazil, Argentina, Colombia. So you've got some really, really good teams there. Messi's playing for Argentina, and they're having a big tournament at the same time. So I've been watching a lot of that while getting Unfound worked. In fact, that's what I was doing today, putting together today's agenda for the live show, and which takes me a little while. And then I have the soccer on, and I'm enjoying it. Just I'm not so much into like MLS, like the North American Soccer League and all that. But when the countries play each other, I'm all into that. And I was been watching some United States track and field trials as well. I got to see Sha'Carri Richardson win her on Saturday night, and then last night Noah Lyles won. And I love that Kenny Bednarek, they call him Kung Fu Kenny. He came in second. Was really happy to see him go into the Olympics. So I've been taking in a lot of sports. As for my Pirates, I've kind of decided that I'm not going to be following them for a while. They're going to have to get back up to a 500 record before I will be listening or watching or following them again. I just can't take that kind of, the way they play, I can't take that kind of negativity in my life at this point. So there you go. Just some things that have been going on with me. And you should also know that I'll be going up to see my dad sometime in mid-July. So like 3 weeks from now or something like that. Haven't really picked out a date. I'm thinking somewhere, maybe drive up there the day of the All-Star game, which is a Tuesday, the baseball All-Star game. Maybe something like that, or maybe even the Saturday, a few days before that, something like that, somewhere in there, if you're wondering. So let's see what everybody, see who's in here. Let's see what everybody is saying, and we can start into the true crime section of the show tonight. Hello, nephew Charlie, what's going on? Hello, Karen, Lisa, Jasmine, Kathy, Hazel, good to see all of you. Sherri, thank you for moderating tonight. Hope you're doing well. Sherri, Deborah, what's going on? All right, so now we got this Caleb news or not. Hello, Sarah. In a sewer 0.7 miles from his apartment at Perry's Place pump station, there was a missing manhole cover. I think I've heard this story before, Cranky99. I don't know if that's new news. For some reason, that sticking in my mind like I've read this before. But maybe not. Maybe it's just deja vu. It's only source true. Not saying it's not true. Just going to need another source before I believe it. The source is notorious for being wrong. JRL investigates he's covering a Facebook Live of someone at the scene. Some human remains were found about 2 hours ago, but they don't know if they are Caleb Harris. We shall see. Unknown remains found inside water station, Channel 3 local news source. Too soon to identify. Yes, it is. I agree. If anybody can tell, how far is that from where he was last seen? This, found in this inside water station. So how far is that from where he was last seen? Maybe somebody can figure that out for me as I continue. I don't know what to make of it. Texas is a huge state. Lots of people going missing, very sadly. And remains, as we all know, remains are found all the time in areas near where disappearances that we've covered on Unfound have happened. And those remains don't end up being the disappearance we featured on Unfound. So not that unusual. So less than a mile. So really not close, not far. But it is, I guess, interestingly, within that mile radius that I always talk about when it comes to searching for people, no matter if it's in the woods or in a field or in a city or anything else. That's interesting. All right, Sherri, just keep your eyes on that if you could. Of course, we have over an hour and a half to go. If there is something more that leads you to believe this could be something, just let me know. All right, let's go to the Valerie Ingorvaya poll. Yeah, Bradley Brooks still missing 2 from that same kind of area. Sherri knows all about that area. Thank you for reminding everybody, Sherri. Valerie Ingorvaya poll. It was a really, I have to admit, this is a disappearance that I think was pretty straightforward, my opinion. So coming up with an interesting or difficult poll question was not easy. So all I did was ask, what was the reason that the charges were dropped against Chance Stelzig in this other, in the beating death of this man just a couple weeks before Valerie went missing. And I remind all of you that he was charged, and then not long before he was supposed to go to trial just last year, April of 2023, all of those charges were dropped. My belief is that the prosecution does have the opportunity to raise those charges again if they want to do that. It's not, so it was without prejudice. It's just, as I stated in the think tank, patreon.com/unfound podcast, if you'd like to be a part of that. It's just really weird to me that it was like 3 years, doing all of this work leading up, and they were just getting ready, I think, for jury selection, and then they just drop everything. You would have thought that if they thought they didn't have a case, I mean, I could understand charging somebody, but it doesn't take 3 years to figure out you don't have a case. I don't know. But the poll was, why do you think they did this? And everybody said, well, at some point they just decided that they just did not have enough evidence. This is the same answer in the think tank that I conducted last night. It happens at 7 p.m., although last night we went at 8 p.m. because I wanted the opportunity to watch the United States men's soccer team play Bolivia. They won 2-0, by the way. So we didn't start to 8 an hour later. And in there, we also decided that the reason that it got dropped was because there was not enough evidence. And then for me, myself, thinking about it, that's what I also thought. And I write a blog on patreon.com/unfound podcast. You can see it across the bottom of the screen there. If you'd like to read or listen, because I do an audio version that usually lasts about 17 minutes. And if you'd like to, it's like getting another podcast once a week. But it's only, like I said, usually around 17 minutes. I also decided that the only reason I can see is they just didn't have enough evidence, or maybe, as I stated in the episode, of course, it very well may be the Chance didn't do it. But what seems more likely to me is that there were 3 guys and they maybe could not decide who actually killed this guy. And there might have been reasonable doubt. They started looking at the case or something happened. All I can say is something in March of last year, 2023, must have happened. And somebody woke up the next morning and said, you know what? Maybe this isn't a very good idea. I don't know. I've never been a lawyer, never gone to law school. I don't know what it's like to be. So I don't know. Because I think that there might have been thinking, well, because this has come up before, all know it has, that, well, did the charges get dropped because he's a snitch? Did he get some sort of conspiracy? I hear a lot of stories like that. All these stories about these guys. Of course, we just had that. We just kind of touched upon that topic with the Hammerly disappearance, remember? And how that guy was known to be a criminal and got away with allegedly sexual molestation, sexual abuse, and all these things, and then finally was charged with something in 1989. And I think if you go back and listen to that episode, there's kind of maybe a reading between the lines in the interviews that I did, well, was he being protected or something? Me, that sounds more like Hollywood stuff than actual reality, although I'm not saying it certainly has happened. Whitey Bulger, a lot of talk about how maybe he got away being in the mob because he was an informant for the FBI. So it does happen. But at the local level, it's just, I don't know. I just hear so much about it. It's like when I hear about missing people being, thrown into wood chippers or being fed to hogs. I hear so much about it that, as I've said, every hog farmer in the United States must be corrupt, must have been involved in at least one murder. I hear so much about wood chippers causing missing people to be chewed up or whatever, that every wood chipper in the United States must have been used to kill somebody or chew up remains or something. And then when it comes to as many stories I hear about small police departments being corrupt and they're letting criminals, every small police department in the United States must be corrupt. And that's just not something that I believe. So a lot of urban legends going on out there. That's not what I think is what's going on here. I think with Chance Stelzig, I think if you just read about the beating of this guy, 3 guys, but it's obvious. I couldn't find any other names that have ever been charged, but we know, if we're to believe this witness, the 3 people were involved in this somehow. Well, they've only charged one Chance. So maybe it just wasn't a very strong case, and it took them 3 years to figure that out. I don't know. So not enough evidence was the decision in the discussion group poll in the think tank, and me, myself, and I writing the blog at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. It's hard to say if we're to believe that Chance did something to Valerie. There's just not enough. There aren't enough facts to really decide why that could have happened. I guess anything is possible. I don't know. Maybe he drank too much. Maybe she didn't like the way he was driving and criticized him for that. Who knows? Just many, many possibilities. The only thing I would say is that if Chance killed Valerie, he had to have pulled over to the side of the road to do that. And I think that's something that all of you, because this comes up in my blog that I wrote. It came up last night in the think tank. It's just something to think about regarding this. So that is the disappearance of Valerie Ingorvaya. Not one of the more mysterious disappearances that I think we've featured on Unfound. And I maybe in most ways it goes in the same stack. The file goes in the same stack as Rosemary Rapp, Marion Hurley, and Angela Green, and a bunch of others, missing women like that. All right, moving on. Of course, we're getting here to near the end of the month. We got, another week to go. June only has 30 days. So for all of you in the public, you should be looking for the next Unfound Now. I've not yet picked out a recent disappearance, but speaking of course, Caleb's disappearance, that was last month, right? I don't know which one I'm going, which recent disappearance that I'm going to pick out. It very well may be the disappearances that I talked about a couple weeks ago, the young woman in Washington and her boyfriend who had the son, and kind of they took off and might have gone to Mexico. Might make that the next Unfound Now. Still looking at my options. I guess I have about 6 days to do that, but when it comes out, it will come out on the YouTube channel, and it will be for everybody. For all of you supporters at Patreon or here on YouTube that have hit the join button below, the next Found episode will be also coming out within the next week. And this is one that's kind of personal to me. I'm not going to give it away just yet, but this is a guy who went missing, and then he was eventually found. Unfortunately, he died first because he was a criminal, and that's why I say unfortunately. but he was on the FBI's most wanted list for many years. And this all happened very close to where I used to live in Pennsylvania, in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. It happened very close to me, and it's not Sherri Mayhem. But this also happened around that time, bizarrely. So that will be the next Found episode. Really looking forward. In fact, I brought this up. My longtime friend from college, Dave, who not only did I go to college with him, but we kind of grew up in the same part of Pennsylvania, although I did not know him until we went to college together. He was not even aware of this this story about this guy who went missing, even though Dave grew up like in that same area too. He goes, wow, I knew all about Sherri Mayhem, but I've never heard of this. Yep, it happened. So that will be the next Found episode, where I look at the disappearance. Then I look at all the years in between when the person is missing. And then I look at how this disappearance eventually got solved. So if that sounds interesting to you, you should sign up at patreon.com/unfound podcast. You do have to sign up at least the $5 a month level. All right, I'm going to get to some of these things that I'm going to do them in the order in which I did not get to them last week. I'm going to start with this. It stuck out to me so much, left an impression on me, that I actually linked this video on the website, the Unfound Podcast.com. And this is from a channel that I view almost every day. It depends on the video. It's the YouTube channel is called Active Self-Protection. It's run by a guy named John Correia, Correia. He's out of Arizona. And he uses real-life videos of self-defense encounters or badge cams from police, things like that. He gets them, and then he analyzes them. And he tries to teach people about, just for regular people, how can you defend yourselves? Keep your heads on a swivel. And so he gets these videos from all over the world, Brazil, the Middle East, Europe, wherever else. It doesn't always have to do with guns. It could be knives. It could be machetes. It could be anything. And he analyzes these encounters between attackers and victims. Very interesting channel. Not always for me, because I really don't like to see the good people die or something, because some of these it does show people dying. So really, I just stick to the ones where the bad guys die. So it kind of depends from day to day whether I'm going to choose to watch it or not. That's just the way I'm very sensitive 21st century kind of guy. But there was a video that came out maybe about 10 days ago, I think, before the last live show, a week ago. And usually these videos that he does, they're really not, maybe the only thing that you can equate them to disappearance is how quickly things can happen. How quickly, a woman walking down the street by herself can be attacked without her knowing it. Somebody pulling up on a motorcycle or something, and how quickly these things can happen. The other point, though, the reason this one sticks out is for a totally different reason. And in watching it, I thought of all of these disappearances that we've featured on Unfound over the past almost 8 years now, where people who saw these people, who we believe, people who can be trusted, say, yeah, the person seemed fine. He seemed fine. She seemed fine. Yes, the person had some mental issues in the past, but at this point, right at the time that this person went missing, she seemed fine. He seemed fine. We get a lot of that. We do. We get a lot of that. And this video that John Correia put on his channel, once again, called Active Self-Protection Channel. He actually has 2 YouTube channels. This would be, one is all just about the one that is the main one. He has another channel. This is the main channel that I'm talking about for him. But to describe it to you, What happens is that it's from a badge cam. So it's a police officer shows up at a car accident. And there's a young man there, and he looks, and you can see him on the badge cam, and you can tell the guy is really frazzled. You could see his car in the background. It's at night, and you could see that his car is really banged up, and it simply looks like he was driving and lost control, ran off the road. Did he hit a wall? Did he hit a telephone pole? I don't remember, but he's walking around. He's really not that injured. It doesn't seem to be. I don't really remember. Of course, there's badge cams, the cameras, the guy's walking around or the woman's walking around, and it's very jerky and everything else. And of course, at night, it's not going to be the greatest quality and everything. But the guy didn't have any broken bones. I don't remember if he was bleeding or anything. But you can certainly tell that he's not high. You can certainly tell that he's not drunk. He's not stumbling around. He's not slurring his words. Nothing. You just think he looks like a guy who was in a wreck that he did not expect. Maybe he fell asleep at the wheel or something. And just, went out, woke up, and he's, and he hit something, and he's just happy to be alive. That's really, if you watch this video, at least the first part of it, that's what it looks like. It really, and he's talking to the cop. He's being very nice. Like I said, you could tell he's a little frazzled, but he's being very courteous to the cop. He's answering the cop's questions, and everything else. Everything seems, like I said, fine, quote unquote, fine. And it's one of those reasons, if you're a police officer out there, I mean, I know we have a bit of criticism when it comes to investigations on Unfound, but when it comes to these everyday situations, pulling people over and showing up at accidents and things, if you believe in that type of thing, God bless those people, because you just never know what's going to happen. And this is a perfect example of this. They're having this fine conversation. The cop's talking to him. The guy's answering the questions, and he goes, man, I just don't know what happened. I just was driving along. It's been a long night. I'm kind of tired. He sounds like a lot of people who've been in accidents that seemingly are just behind the wheel, and you shouldn't be, shouldn't be sleeping while you're driving anyway, but we know it happens. So they're getting along really well. Really, really well. It's going to amaze you once you watch this video, and I know I'm ruining it here when I tell you what happened. But all of the sudden, out of nowhere, this young guy, I think he was in his 20s, doesn't look like he's a bad guy, or anything like that. Doesn't look like a criminal, whatever that means. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, he darts to his car. He's standing there with the cop. All of a sudden, he darts back to his wrecked car, and the cop's like, what are you doing? And the guy starts screaming, I have a gun. You better shoot me. I have a gun. You better shoot me. And he turns around, and the cop, of course, at night and the guy's screaming, and the cop pulls his gun out, and he's telling the guy, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop doing this. What are you doing? Stop doing this. Get on the ground. Don't do this. What are you doing? Because the cop's just like, what's happening here? What's happening here? And this young man pretended like he had a gun, and the cop had to shoot him and killed him. Dead. And I think it has been called a justified shooting, because the guy just completely lost his mind under the circumstances, saying, it's one of those things. If somebody says, I have a gun and I'm going to shoot you, you know what? You're probably best off believing that person. You're probably, especially if there's video or something that's going to show that that's what this person did, whether it's your badge cam or if you're at the local 7-Eleven or whatever else. If you're out there and somebody yells at you and says, I have a gun and I'm going to shoot you, your best option is to believe it and run away if you don't have a gun, or if you do carry one, well, you got you have some very difficult decisions to make there. But you're best off. Somebody says they have a gun, it's best to believe it. So this cop did all that he could to try to, not have to shoot this kid. But he did. And it turned out the kid did not have a gun. He wanted to be shot. And it is one, of course, I watch a lot of videos on YouTube when it comes to crimes and things like that. And you know how unusual it must be for me to pick it out and put it on the website, the link, at least the link to it, so all of you can see it. So what it turned out was, what the real story was, despite what the kid was saying about, he just didn't know what happened. The fact is this: what they found out was this kid had been suicidal, and he tried to kill himself by wrecking his car. And when that didn't work, he decided to do suicide by cop. So once again, even though he's standing there talking to the cop, yes, he seems a little frazzled, but like I said before, anybody would be in just a regular situation. You're in a car wreck. You don't know what happened. Maybe even if you've had like a deer jump in front of you and you swerved off the road and wrecked your car, you know how that adrenaline, just your heart rate's at like 70 beats a minute. And then before you know, it's like 180 beats a minute and your mind's racing and the airbag goes off. You're fine. You're just like, what the heck? This is the way this kid seemed. And I'm sure in this cop's experience, of course, I don't know how experienced this cop was, but let's just say he's been on the job for 10 years. He's probably come across a lot of car wrecks, people acting exactly like this kid was. And they were having this nice conversation and everything, but all the while in the back of this kid's mind, he was thinking, I want this cop to kill me, even though he seems fine. And this is why, if you go and watch the video on Unfound's website, theunfoundpodcast.com, you'll see the page there. I've termed that video the quote unquote, I'm fine lie. And this is a perfect example. Going back a few weeks when I had a criticism, well, it's common sense that there is no common sense that could lead you to believe that that was what was going to happen in that video, with that police officer showing up and having this decent conversation with this kid. And then in a split second, this kid is trying to get the cop, and successfully did get this cop to shoot him. So when we think about disappearances, and unfortunately, and I love all the guests, thank you all guests for having appeared on Unfound. I love all of you. But when they say, well, he was fine, she was fine, I'm going to keep reminding all of you, doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean diddly. We don't know what's in these people's minds. We can't use common sense because we don't know what's in their minds. And what they think makes sense probably doesn't make sense to us, because looking at this video, and like I said, I hope all of you watch it, there is no sense to be made of any of it. This kid, he didn't successfully kill himself wrecking his car. He had an opportunity to rethink his life choices and think, is this really what I want to do? He hasn't been killed. He has an opportunity to think, you know what? I think I'm going to give this life thing another try. Nope. Instead, he provokes a police officer to the point where the police officer has to shoot him. This is so I cannot think of a better example of what is in my head when I'm trying to convey to all of you or guests or whoever else, this idea that we don't know what is in people's heads. We don't know. And so it's not useful to think of disappearances in those terms, saying he would never, she would never. We can't use those kinds of absolutes. In fact, as you know, as I've talked about, the only kind of absolute that I have is that criminals like to get away with their crimes. That doesn't mean they're perfect. That doesn't mean they're smart. That doesn't mean they'll successfully do so. But nobody really, really wants to go to jail. Even if we think about these school shooters, or like the shooting that happened in Las Vegas, the mass shooting in Las Vegas that happened from the Mandalay Bay down onto that concert. We can't think of it in those terms because those people, that's kind of different. Those people had no exit strategy. They wanted to die. These people, whether you think about Columbine or all these, it's obvious none of these people have an escape strategy. They're going to go in there. They're going to kill as many people as possible. They know the cops are going to show up. They know they're going to die. The guy at the Mandalay Bay, he knew there was no way he was getting out of there. He knew as soon as he started shooting, his crazy or whatever was going through his head, he knew the cops were going to show up and he was going to die. So we can't think of it in those terms. We think of it in terms of people killing other people who then want to make plans to get away. It's really the only overarching idea that we can have in disappearances where there are facts to lead us to believe that there was foul play. And you also know that I have an issue in disappearances where there's no reason to believe there was foul play, but people think that there was foul play anyway. Maybe this goes back to like Brianna Maitland from like a month ago. Of course, a lot of people believe that there was foul play. Now, I ask all of you, is there any real difference between that video I just explained to you that is on the Active Self-Protection site, the video that I linked to on Unfound's website, theunfoundpodcast.com, and Brianna Maitland's car being backed into that house? Now, if you've told, the thing is, it's, what? It's pretty good that cop had a badge cam. Because what if the badge cam didn't exist? And the only story would be, the cop just had to tell whoever else showed up, other police officers, we were getting along fine. And then he claimed he had a gun and I had to shoot him. Would anybody believe that? Maybe after they looked into this kid's background and found out that he had mental health issues and everything. Maybe. But I think everybody would probably react as, I think this cop shot him for no reason. But that's not what happened. So it's I think, to me, like I said, being that I do this for my work, I find this to be an amazing topic, an amazingly interesting topic of how people are unpredictable. And when we start thinking about this missing person would never, of course, what do we usually hear? He would never leave his family. She would never leave her kids. We hear about this, even though we know people do this all the time. We lie to ourselves. We are so good as humans at lying to ourselves. You know who don't lie to themselves? Animals don't lie to themselves. They're not intelligent enough to do it. Lying to ourselves is a function of our intelligence, unfortunately. So I want you to check that out. It's disturbing. If you have a very weak stomach for things, it's not graphic, but it's a real life horror movie without the blood and everything. It goes so badly, so fast. This police officer, I think, does everything he can to not have to shoot this guy, but he just has to. It's obvious that if he doesn't do it, then maybe we were taught. Taylor, we were already talking about that. You got to check the chat before you. Please check the chat before you just get in here and type something. We've already discussed that a little bit. But I want you to check it out. Like I said, the video isn't for everybody. But if you have a stronger stomach, you should watch it. And then you'll see inside my head when I start talking about people are unpredictable. We don't know what's in their heads. Who knows what's good? They seem fine, but they may not have been. They might have been cool, calm, and collected and everything else, but still water runs deep when really at their core, they're looking to run off. They're looking to do this. They're looking to do that. So the I'm fine lie, please. The kid seemed like just some other young kid, maybe speeding or something. Well, he was speeding because he was trying to kill himself. All right, moving on. I want to move on to this jet story. This is once again something that I didn't get to last week. 53 years, and me in plane crashes. 53 years after a private plane. This is very interesting because usually we're talking maybe about Cessnas, which I guess are private planes, but this was actually a private jet. And not too many private jets go missing. Cessnas do, maybe go down in the woods somewhere, anything, but not too many private jets. And this is what makes this unusual. 53 years after a private plane carrying 5 men disappeared on a snowy Vermont night, experts believe they have found the wreckage of the long-lost jet in Lake Champlain, which is in New York, or in Vermont, or maybe New York. The corporate jet, so it's a corporate jet, disappeared shortly after departing the Burlington Airport for Providence, Rhode Island on January 27, 1971. So I wasn't even 6 months old. Those aboard included 2 crew members and 3 employees of a Georgia development company, Cousins Properties, who were working on a development project in Burlington. Initial searches for the 10-seat jet commander turned up no wreckage, and the lake froze over 4 days after the plane was lost. That didn't help. At least 17 other searches over the years happened. So it's been over 50 years, 17 searches. So like one every 3 years. Until underwater searcher Gary Kozak and a team using a remotely operated vehicle last month found the wreckage of a jet with the same custom paint scheme in the lake, close to where the radio control tower had last tracked the plane before it disappeared. Sonar images were taken of the wreck, found in 200 feet of water near Juniper Island. With all those pieces of evidence, we're 99% absolutely sure that it is the plane. And of course, they have interviews with some of the family members, saying how happy they are. When the ice melted in the spring of 71, debris from the plane was found on Shelburne Point, according to Kozak. An underwater search in May of 71 was unable to find the wreckage. At least 17 other searches happened, including in 2014. At that time, authorities were spurred by curiosity after the Malaysian Airlines plane disappearance that year with the hope that new technology would find the wreck, but it did not. And once again, they're talking to more family members, and they're thanking this guy, Kozak, for not giving up. The NTSB is investigating to verify it's the plane. The NTSB doesn't do salvage operations, which would be expensive. Whether there is tangible remains, and I hate to say it that way, and worth disturbing, that's a decision that we'll have to figure out later, and part of what we're unpacking right now. It's hard when you start to think about that. The relatives of the victims plan to hold a memorial now that they know where the plane is located. So this first, of course, caught my attention because I take an interest in plane crashes. I still do that, even though I'm caught up in all these disappearances. There are a few YouTube channels like Blanco Lirio and Pilot Debrief and Mentor Pilot. These are channels that I go to because they talk about plane crashes, both ones that happened years ago and then ones that are happening right now. Why that is, I don't know. It's once again going back to when I was a kid. Now, what is a little puzzling to me, though, is that it seems like they knew exactly where the plane was. And they knew that it went into this lake. And even with the snow, I mean, I realized that this happened in December and the lake's going to freeze over, and that does make it more difficult. But like I said, in the spring of 71, they went back to searching and still couldn't find it. 17 other searches, still couldn't find it, even though they knew that it went into this lake. And I realized that Lake Champlain is not small, but as I said, planes, with radar, and it occurred right after takeoff. Why it went down, don't know. Could have been ice. Could have been icing on the plane. I guess that's a possibility. Could be that one of the pilots got disoriented, what they call spatial disorientation. Could have sent that plane into the water. Very easy to understand. Still very common to this day in plane and jet crashes. It's just really weird that it took them all this time, but I guess this once again shows us the perception of searching is a lot different than the process of searching. And surely there was technology even in the early 1970s that could have been used easily used to find that jet. 200 feet is not even really that deep. If you have the proper mixture for humans can go down to 200 feet under the water. If they have the right mixture, you can't just use oxygen. You have to use that special mixture of nitrogen and oxygen so you don't get the bends and everything else. But humans can dive down to 200 feet, no problem. And still, they couldn't find this plane, even though there was radar and they knew that it wrecked. It wasn't like some mystery. Where did this jet go? So it just, it caught my eye. This is one of those disappearances that the perception, I think if this, what would happen today, maybe it might be a little different. Being that jets and even Cessna's propeller planes, most of them have GPS on them. And if you have a site like Flight Radar 24, it's fairly accurate. Probably couldn't happen today. I know with Flight 370, but it's a special case because everything got turned off and it was on purpose, no matter what you believe happened. But I think with something like this, if this were happened today with a jet right after takeoff and they think that it went into the water, given GPS and everything these days, it wouldn't be missing for 50 some years. But even then, back then, you wouldn't have thought it would last that long. I'm sure when this all happened, it went in the lake. I mean, it went off radar, it went into the lake. We found debris on the shore of the lake. It's in there somewhere. We just have to go find it. 17 searches and nothing. It took 18 searches to find it. So when we start thinking about disappearances that we cover on Unfound that aren't plane related, and we think about Jason Landry and some others, if they can't find a plane in a lake for 53 years, in my opinion, it's much harder to find a person on dry land than it would be to find a plane in a lake, especially when you know that it went into the water in this lake because there's debris on the shore and everything. This is how we have to think about these things. So there is that story. Once again, you want to check it out. It's the story is a few weeks old. Like I wanted to cover it last week. Didn't get to talk about it, but this found jet. And I think if you just Google it or do a search for it, lost jet found in Lake Champlain, I think you'll find a lot of articles about it that are much more detailed than the one that I chose to read here. There's been many, many articles written about it since this all happened. All right, moving on. Once again, something else that I kind of touched upon right at the end, but I really didn't think I gave it the time that I thought I should, so I want to go over it again tonight. Let me see what everybody's saying. Cranky99 was going over the story of Otis Redding last week. His private plane was overladen with band members and too much equipment, crashed a mile or two from the airstrip. Yep, kind of like how Aaliyah died too, Cranky99. Remember the singer Aaliyah? She died in a plane crash, 20 years ago? Was she in the Bahamas or Puerto Rico or somewhere? And she and the rest of her entourage got on that plane. way overloaded, and they crashed and all got killed. Very common. That's why, for me, I will tell all of you, I would never get in a propeller plane, one of these little Cessnas or something like that. It's amazing to me how many people flying those, like college football coaches flying those, because they go, they want to go recruit somebody and they don't want to have to, it's too far to drive and they don't want to fly commercial. So they'll, the school have a propeller plane or a jet. Still, it's a somewhat safe way to travel, but it's not as safe as flying in a passenger plane, no matter all the way the media tries to scare us about Boeing and everything these days. Still, commercial travel in big jets is safer than any other kind of travel. So when I hear, famous football coaches or famous people flying in these little planes and everything, I'm like, I couldn't do it. Kobe, yeah, well, that was a helicopter, Amy. Same kind of thing. And that was a situation where it was get there-itis. He wanted to go to this basketball camp or whatever it was. Another copter pilot flew right into the fog. Can't do that. Can't do it. Can't do it. You get into the fog, you're going to lose your bearings, and our brains and our balance systems are not meant to be in situations where we don't know what up and down is. It's very sad. Should not have been there. Should have turned around, gone back to the airport. Forget it. Sorry. But you start studying this type of stuff, like commercial jet crashes over the years, or even private jet crashes. Lots of pilots or passengers pressuring pilots to get places, no matter the weather, the conditions, the condition of the plane, the expertise of the pilots. It is amazing how much that happens and how much it leads to crashes. It's called get there-itis, and it gets people killed for sure. All right, Aidan Clune. This is a post from like last weekend. It was by his mother, Amy. I have sad news. Aidan's shoes were located Thursday afternoon in an area of the Cherry Creek Range that was previously searched. The area is vast and rugged, and items could be passed within yards and not be seen. I know this from my own experience. That line of sight is very limited in rugged and rocky areas. The shoes were about 10 feet apart yesterday, Friday, June 14th. A 6-man team of law enforcement and local volunteers executed a grid search around the perimeter of the shoe locations. It was 98 degrees in the range. Nothing further was found. Law enforcement and other searches will plan another search when conditions are right, and they can put together more resources for that terrain. You have to realize it's now Nevada. It's now June. It's getting up to 115. Too dangerous. I am deeply appreciative and grateful for all searchers, individuals, and organizations that continued by process of elimination to bring us to this recent find. Every single contribution of investigation, time, effort, and resources have been invaluable in the search for Aidan. Thank you and blessings to each and every one of you. Signed, Amy. I have to believe, of course, unfortunately, as I think was obvious in the episode, Aidan Clune is probably not with us anymore. But I think, I don't want to put necessarily a time frame on it, but I'm pretty sure eventually they are going to find him. They're going to find his remains out there somewhere. I just think that it sounds to me like they've obviously, as you heard in that episode from how long was that, 6 weeks ago or something, they've been very thorough. They have found things that pertain to Aidan. I think they've gone about this the best way they know how. I think it's been organized, even though this is some of the most inhospitable parts of the lower 48 of the United States. Certainly most of Alaska is worse certain times of year, but certainly in the lower 48 where they are out in that part of, northeast Nevada. I mean, you talk about There's a reason they built a secret military base out there in that part of the country. There are reasons. But they're finding things to show you if you go about this the right way and it's organized and everything, you can make progress. And even though I know that it's been a little while that he went missing and there are animals and out there, I really do believe that I'm not sure if they'll find all of them, but I think they will find some of him. I think they have to be open to the idea still that maybe at some point in Aiden's mind, it kicked in, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And that he might have sought cover somewhere. Because I know, although I've never been out in that area, I kind of know, like if you go like down near Las Vegas, if you go out to like Lake Mead, it's kind of the same thing, but it's not as bad because, of course, Henderson's there, Boulder City's there, Kingman's there, Las Vegas is there. It's not out in the middle of nowhere. But still, it's kind of the same terrain. And what you find is high on some of these hillsides, or if you want to call them mountains, there are caves. And as I think maybe I pointed out some weeks ago, that they actually found remains of a murder victim in one of those caves near Lake Mead. This, by the way, that victim has still not been identified. His code name, I guess, is what you call it right now at the Clark County Coroner's Office, is Sandstone Doe, if you want to look that case up. But this guy was executed, and his body was put up in one of these caves near Lake Mead, and there were like rocks and things put in front of it, so people maybe wouldn't find him. But, and like I said, they have no idea who he is. He could be an American, could be from some other country. We don't know. But unfortunately, what happened, I think, in that case is there were some hikers in the area, and they happened to see these rocks where those rocks are stacked like there was humans up there. What's going on? The hikers went up there to check out, why are these rocks stacked like this? This had to have been done by humans. This wasn't natural. And when they started looking, they saw the remains inside the cave. I think that's what happened. So for Aiden, I realize it's easy for me to talk, but I think they have to keep in mind that he might have been seeking shelter high up in one of these mountains, because even though it's pretty flat, if you get up one of these mountains, at least when the sun is on one side of the mountain, you can be in the shade. And when the sun goes to the other side, you can be in the shade, something like that. And that might have been on his mind, but that also might have been too late. So I think most likely if he's found, he's going to be found up, not going to be found in one of these plain areas, PLAIN areas, as in flat area, not plain as in normal or average or whatever, but plain is in a flat area. I don't think he's going to be found in the flat areas between the mountains. I think he's going to be found up at some elevation. But they found his shoes. This is one of those situations. It strikes me as very much like hypothermia. What happens when your body starts shutting down and you're freezing to death, and for some reason your mind starts thinking, well, you got to take these clothes off. People do that. Hypothermia, they lose their minds, and even though it's 0 out, they start taking their clothes off. That's a sure sign of hypothermia. I think that might have been what's going on here, except the other extreme. No good reason to take off your shoes out in the desert. That's like a bad choice, but it seems like what Aiden did. Very sad. Very sad. So I wanted to give that a little more attention than I did last week, of course, because it's one of Unfound's disappearances. All right, let's move on to this. Just when you thought you had heard, no, you know what? I'm going to answer this question first, and then we're going to get into Sherri Papini. All right, it was Jasmine, and I think you might be in here tonight, Jasmine. And by the way, one more time, being that we're over an hour in, please give this video a thumbs up. Please give this show a thumbs up. If you're listening to this as a podcast, please give this podcast a nice review. Give it 5 stars on iTunes or wherever you are listening. Okay. Jasmine asked If you can tell a family member or friend of your guest to keep up on one thing in case of a disappearance, what would it be? What I would say is that you can never let your emotions get in the way of thinking in an irrational way, not necessarily in a logical way, because like I said, there's no common sense or logic to any of this. But you cannot allow your emotions to take you off on tangents that really are just built on fear or paranoia or hopes and wishes and everything else. You have to stay very grounded. And this is kind of goes back to what I was talking about in the first hour. You hear all these stories, and it's amazing how many family members believe this stuff about wood chippers, about hogs, about all of these things. It's amazing how many of them, now some of them are, like we know this crap, but a lot of them, I think in one way or another, think this stuff. And to me, that's what I'm talking about. You have to stay away from that stuff. Now, it very well may be that their missing loved one was murdered. But you have to stay away from stuff like that. And that's what I try to give my guests a rational way of thinking. This is mainly, of course, not done in the interviews, but in leading up to the interviews, when I really start asking them about what they're thinking and what they've been doing. And some of them, I think, take me seriously, and some of them don't. And what I keep leaning on is, as showing them as an example, is all of these disappearances. Now that we have 300, almost 40 of them, we have about 10% of unfound disappearances that have been solved. We can look at those and say, well, what happened? Why did it happen? And we have, a diversity of reasons for these disappearances. We've had murder solved. We've had at least one suicide that's been solved, accidents, overdoses. It's a mixture. And so you can look at those and kind of get an idea. And what you see is, although we've been surprised a few times, I wouldn't say there's been anything that has been crazy, cray, just like totally out of craziness. Nothing like that. And so that is also something that I try to pass on to the guests. You start looking at solved disappearances, they're usually pretty straightforward. Yes, we may be surprised, but still, it's somewhat not rational, but predictable. You start thinking about what was probably happened. It's one of those. Now, we might have been surprised that Bowman was only a quarter mile away, but I don't think anybody is surprised that he was deceased. I don't think anybody was surprised that maybe he was in the Santa Monica area. Maybe they're surprised, like I said, he was only a quarter mile away. That might have been a little very surprising, but it's not like he was found in Kansas out on the streets. That would have been wacky. But him being found in the city limits of Santa Monica and deceased, I don't know. Certainly, I don't know if it would have been anybody's first choice, but it was certainly within the range of what we could predict. And so that's what I try to pass along and to guess. And, like I said, some of them, I appreciate them still coming on Unfound, but I know some of them think that I'm crazy and they're really locked into what they want to believe. And as you would not be surprised, most of these people default way too much toward foul play. Way too much. According to our Unfound statistics, 60 to 65% of the disappearances that we featured most likely are foul play. I would say that the guests for the most, they're up in that 90% range. So that's what, that's what I try to tell. I really, really try to work on them to think in, like I said, not a common, because you have to learn these things. It's not common sense. Common sense is not going to help you. I try to educate them on these disappearances so then they can use the rational side of their brain to make good decisions. That's tough. Because most of them think that it was foul play. They want somebody to pay for this disappearance. They think it was foul play. They want revenge, not revenge in a violent way, but you know what I mean. And it very well could be in some of these situations, right? Like Valerie and Gervaya, that's probably a pretty good choice that there was foul play there. Probably pretty good choice, as several others that we've covered. But when you get into those ones where you cover 340 disappearances and you start to see these patterns, and the ones that were solved were kind of like this, and it's foul play, and guests are still insisting that it's foul play, those are the ones where the conversations can get a little dicey. And going back to the I'm fine lie, families believe that stuff. And even though they're saying that the person was bipolar, the person had a drug addiction, the person was this person, well, the person was fine. You're welcome, Jasmine. So that's the one thing that, it's so difficult. It's easy for me to talk, for me to say, but you have to keep your emotions in check, and you just have to be so cold-hearted when thinking about their own disappearance. It's tough, but that's the only way you're going to get anywhere. Because everything else, going with your fears and riding what we might call the emotional roller coaster, that's a lot of wasted time, energy, money, everything else. All right, let's talk about Sherri Papini. Keith Papini is on a book tour. And I'll read this article. It's from people.com. Look at me. Keith Papini is continuing to speak out about his ex-wife, Sherri Papini. In an interview, he said that he doesn't think his ex-wife is able to understand how much pain she caused after she lied for years about being kidnapped in 2016. To be honest, I don't think she's capable of seeing what she did in the lives that it affected, the ripple effect, how much pain she caused so many people. I always think about all the people who tried to help during those 22 days that she was missing, all the kids that probably weren't allowed to ride their bikes anymore, all the women that probably didn't go jogging anymore. I don't think she has any understanding of how detrimental it was. Keith also reflected on why he thinks Sherri faked her kidnapping. I do believe the core thing would be attention. I think she likes it when people feel for her and look at her as a victim at anyone's cost. Sherri's story made national headlines in 2016. In the years following, authorities and the public began to cast doubt on whether she was really kidnapped and held captive for 22 days. You realize this just happened. The solution to this just happened within the last couple of years. So when we started Unfound in 2016, of course, this just happened right after that. And I did speak about her story a couple times on this live show while it was still up in the air. Well, did that really happen? And I always came back to, do you know how rare it is for two adult women to kidnap another woman? That is like the rarest of the rarest of the rarest. I don't care about Sherri claiming they were Hispanic, any race, any ethnicity, anything. I don't care about that. Just two adult women kidnapping another woman. It's like unheard of. That's what always stuck out to me. This is why I was like, this doesn't sound right. Do women who are jogging get kidnapped? Yes. Do they get murdered? Yes. It's usually by men. So back in 2022, after DNA evidence showed she was with her ex-boyfriend at the time, she said she was being tortured by two Hispanic women. Sherri pleaded guilty to felony charges of making false statements to federal agents and mail fraud. Yeah, that's what, like I said back then when this all happened, What really got her in trouble is not, I mean, doing all the lying and everything was not good, but that she accepted that victim money, tax money. That's what really, really, really got her in trouble. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison and served a shortened sentence. Sherri is now free and able to have supervised visits with her children, Violet and Tyler, once a month. Keith and Sherri met in grade school. The former couple lost touch when Sherri and her family moved away, but they rekindled their romance later in life. When she moved back in 2006, they married years later. In an exclusive conversation with People, Keith opened up about his ex-wife's saga and how he came to grips with her history of lying. At the end of the day, you feel like if you can trust anyone, it's your partner in life, but I was wrong. She definitely had a history of exaggerating, and I would say at this point, lying. There's lots of things I didn't question. I grew up with a lovely mother and father. I was never around a dishonest person to that extent growing up. And when we first got together, she told me things. I believed her. I wouldn't know why I wouldn't. She told me she went to college in Orange County. She told me she was in ballet. She told me she used to sell cars at a dealership and all these different things. And I wasn't going to go calling her around to verify that those were real. But there was definitely some things where I'm like, hey, the timeline doesn't match up. Like you said, you did this or you lived at this spot, but this doesn't make sense to me because the timeline's not right. And she always had a way of just skirting around it. And I kind of just went along with it. Sherri is saying, just watch the Papini doc on Hulu. Really good. She has a new millionaire boyfriend. Yeah. You know why? Because guys are suckers. And as I stated, I don't feel like I'm sexist stating this. The reason that she was able to tell all these stories, not just to her husband and everybody else, is because she was an attractive woman. That's right. Now, it very well may be the women around her probably saw through her like this. I see through her in a second, and you women are great at that. But, for us guys, it's just one of those things. Of course, most men are certainly capable of picking out women who are liars. Of course, we're talking about heterosexual relationships. Men are certainly capable, but people like Sherri Papini or women like Sherri Papini are predators. They're not violent in the way we think about predators. They aren't a serial killer or anything, but they know the lies that are going to work on certain men. They're predators, pathological, sociopaths. That's what Sherri Papini is. Is she capable of killing anybody? I don't know. But she's certainly good in the manipulation game, probably once again because nobody of the male persuasion has ever said no to her because she knew how to manipulate certain guys who were attracted to her. And no, and Sherri telling me, Key, that Sherri signed a postnuptial agreement after they were married. That's interesting. So you got to see the warning signs, people. I don't know. It's hard for me to tell. He's talking about all of this. Did he notice? Is he saying did he not notice until after they were married or what? But if he's really saying he knew all these things and still married her, well, that's on him. It's just the way it is. And I suppose men are the same way. I guess what we would say in our culture, and I realize different cultures in Western culture, high value people can get away with anything. So we talk about attractive women or rich women too, or rich men, attractive men, all these people who are shakers and movers and alpha males and alpha females and all these things. They, if they are pathological, now we know a lot of people who have these qualities who are great at life and look great and do all these things. And most of them are harmless. They're spectacular people. They put their time in, they donate to charities and all of these other things. They're great citizens, of the United States or wherever else. But then there's those other people. And Sherri is one of those. And I can't say it surprises me at all that she has a new millionaire boyfriend. Doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, this is one of those things, I think, where the average guy, I think, gets this. And that the average guy, and when I say average guy, I don't mean necessarily average looks or average anything necessarily, but just, in the middle of the bell curve of straight guys. I think they would just look at Sherri Papini and say, oh, that's crazy. But then it's the guys like at the fringes of that range, of that bell curve, that I think are more likely to get suckered in, like millionaires. So, let's see. Guys or suckers love it. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. I think he was saying he didn't want to face what he perceived as lies from her and didn't press it. Mistake on his part. She got a severance package and then sent the kids to daycare. Keith didn't want to pay for daycare if she was going to be at home. So that was one of the reasons for the disappearance. Couldn't possibly expect her to work after all that trauma. Yeah. It's one of those things where Sherri Papini, like I said, I don't mean to be sexist about this, but I got to tell you the way I see it, as a guy who covers disappearances and looks at people's behaviors, and is also a straight guy who's attracted women. She will get away with this until the very day where no guy finds her attractive anymore, because that's all she has to offer, the way I see it, as far as just physical attraction. And we all know it all goes away for all of us. Not all of us can be 25 for our entire lives. No matter how much surgery and Botox and everything you get. And we know even that eventually makes people look like Muppets or something. She'll be able to get away with this until the day that she loses her beauty. And then she's going to be a very lonely person. And she is going to be she's going to have a very miserable life if she lives for any amount of time. If she doesn't die in a plane crash or a car wreck or get cancer, if she is meant to be on this earth until she's like 90 or 100 years old, she is going to be a miserable person. And nobody should feel sorry for her. She earned it. I think that, it's like I could say so much about this particular topic. Given that I'm not 25 anymore and I'm 53, and we see things, Gen Xers out there, people have been born like 1962 to 1970 or 1980, whatever is considered Gen X. We are of a certain age now where we're in the second half of our lives, but the first half of our lives is not really that far behind us. And we can remember high school pretty well, and college, and we remember how certain people were treated and how certain people were acted and how they acted this way and everything else. And if you get into your 50s, you see how much things can change for certain people. And this is kind of what I think about when I think about Sherri Papini. She'll be fine until her powers don't work anymore, and she has nothing to back them up. Like my experience though is in my life, I realize it's very just easy from a guy's point of view. Well, all attractive women are bitchs. Not true. Not true. Very easy. It's kind of like the Aesop fable, the fox and the grapes. Well, can't date her, so she's really not that great. Actually, most women of all attraction levels and everything are pretty good. Pretty good. Now I'm single at 53. I don't know what to tell you. But I just don't think that, given that Sherri Papini is attractive, let's not just put all attractive women together. I think she is certainly an exception. And she's a very, very bad exception. But, I think just, we've seen these things. She's going to reap what she has sown. And her new millionaire boyfriend is not going to be able to save her from that. This isn't going to be a situation like Robert Downey Jr., who got smart in jail and got out and decided to be the best guy on earth. This is not going to happen with Sherri Papini. Not going to happen. She's going to be miserable, and she'll have no friends, no money, nothing. Unless she changes her ways and is honest about it. Also interesting was that Keith's friends was outside James' house week 1 of her disappearance. No. Well, I guess there still is that thinking out there. Did the husband actually know more than he let on? And I still insist, despite what he's saying here, and he's trying to come across as the good guy and everything, he had to know. He had to know. But they have kids together. And I realize this is an extreme case, but we're all adults here. We know how many adults keep marriages together, even though they know the other spouse is a horrible, horrible person. We know that happens. It's happening right now, millions and millions and millions of times. So maybe we're letting Keith off a little easy here, and he's trying to get off easily with all of this, saying I was just an innocent victim. Not so sure. He says there were moments when he thought she was lying, but then he felt guilty because of her injuries. Yeah. Master manipulator, Sherri Papini. Master manipulator. All right, let's move on to this. I want to get to this story about these murders that were solved. I want to read this story because they have been, in some circles, were the murders of these two women connected to the murders in Virginia that some people call the Colonial Parkway murders. All right, so murder solved. A deceased convict serial rapist from Ohio has been identified as the suspect responsible for the murders of two women in Shenandoah National Park nearly 30 years ago, a case that has confounded investigators. DNA evidence that was recently retested linked Walter Leo Jackson Sr. of Cleveland, Ohio, to the killings of 24-year-old Julianne Williams and 26-year-old Laura Lolly Winans. After 28 years, we are now able to say who committed the brutal murders of Lolly Winans and Julie Williams. The U.S. Attorney said. Both women, who were a couple, were killed on May 24th, 1996 at their Virginia campsite. So you can see Colonial Parkways, murders, Virginia. These are also happened in Virginia. Near the Skyland Resort, family members called the National Park Service when the women didn't return home. The pair began hiking in Shenandoah National Park on May 19th. They were due to return to their summer jobs in Vermont on May 28th, but no one had heard from them, according to media reports at the time. Their bodies were found on June 1st, 1996, during a search by park rangers. They had been bound and their throats had been slashed. Does that sound familiar? Their murder sparked shock and fear throughout the community and nation. We now know who is responsible for this heinous crime. Jackson died in prison in Cuyahoga County, Ohio in March 2018. His criminal history includes kidnapping, rapes, and assaults. He was forensically linked to 2 rapes that occurred in Cuyahoga County in Ohio in June and July of 96, so right around the time these 2 women were murdered. And Jackson was a painter by trade and was an avid hiker who was known to visit Shenandoah National Park. In 2004, another man, Darrell Rice, was indicted for the killings, but the charges were dropped when DNA failed to link him to the crimes, plural. With funding from the Department of Justice Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, investigators combed through everything in the case file, re-examining evidence, photos, and interviews. Considering advancements in DNA technology, the team spent countless hours determining what pieces of evidence could be retested. A lab pulled DNA from the evidence and submitted the results to the federal DNA index system. They found a positive match to Jackson. Those results confirmed we had the right man and finally tell the victims' families we know who's responsible for this heinous crime. Federal investigators said Jackson was likely driving a 1984 chestnut brown AMC Eagle at the time of the murders, though he was known to use temporary tags, alter license plates, and frequently change vehicles. Now, I wonder right about now how the Colonial Parkway theorists who are thinking that all of those murders and the disappearances, of course, of Keith Call and Sandra Haley are all done by the same guy. And of course, we know some months ago through DNA that a guy was identified who killed 2 of those. The one couple, of course, the adult, the guy who was with the girl, underage girl. So the reason I'm talking about this and the reason I wanted you to remember they were bound and stabbed or slashed throat slits is because that's exactly how Rebecca Dowski and Kathy Thomas were killed. Exactly. Now, what also catches my attention, now I would admit back in those episodes that came out at the end of 2022, where I talked about my own theories about what would happen with Sandra Haley, Keith Call, and the rest of these murders, I have to admit that I said that, of course, I first said that I don't think any of them are connected. And with Rebecca Dowski and Kathy Thomas, I'd put forth the idea that my most probable theory is that, of course, Kathy Thomas had been in a heterosexual relationship, and this guy religiously had something against gay people, and he might have tracked Kathy down when she's Rebecca and killed them both. That's what I put forth. Now, I very well could be wrong about that, but it seemed to make a lot of sense. Of course, we don't go by sense, but given what are the odds of that, it is interesting to me. Of course, what has always stuck out to me regarding Rebecca and Kathy's murders is that they weren't raped. You start talking about women who get murdered and it's slashing and bound and everything, usually the R word almost always comes up. Almost always. But Rebecca and Kathy were not raped. Well, you remember from what I just read, these 2 women, of course, they were a lesbian couple just like Rebecca and Kathy were. That's another similarity. Those 2 women, I guess, weren't raped either. It doesn't say it. Now, they had DNA, but they could get DNA from other things that the guy could have left behind. They might have scratched him, or there's skin under the fingernails, or there's a lot of different ways to get DNA other than just semen. But it doesn't sound to me, at least it's not in the article, that these 2 women were raped. Rebecca and Kathy weren't raped either. They were both slashed. They were both bound. They were both lesbian couples. Starting to see maybe a similarity here. And of course, they're in Virginia, although Shenandoah National Park and where Rebecca and Kathy are not close to each other. It's still something to consider, I think. Now that we know, and of course, with this guy, this guy that they've identified, of course, is not the same guy who killed the couple the next year in 1987. That guy was not this Jackson guy. So could lead us to believe that this Jackson guy could have killed Rebecca and Kathy. Now that we see more similarities, I mean, I'm just more open to that now than I was before. Maybe he was in that area and came across the two. It still seems from a percentage point of view, I still like the idea that it was somebody who actually really did know Rebecca or Kathy, in more particular, Kathy. But this would throw a wrench in the idea that this was all done by the same guy, I think. So I wanted to read that to you. Maybe you have your own opinions on that. You can think about that. Maybe you want to put that in the chat, or maybe if you're listening or watching this after, you want to put that in the comment section. What do you think about all of that? What are the possibilities that Rebecca Dowski and Kathy Thomas were killed by this Jackson guy and not by maybe Kathy Thomas's, was it her ex-husband or ex-boyfriend? I can't remember. Or the guy that killed the other couple in 1987. Could it be totally somebody else? And like I said, I've always been under the idea that they're all separate incidents. I think there are good reasons to believe factually that they're all separate incidents. And maybe this is a sign that I'm right. So you can start looking that up once again if you want to look that up again. The victims were Julianne Williams and Laura Winans, Winans, if you want to look those murders up. And there have now been extensive articles written about how they came upon Jackson. You can check that all out. And you can decide, could he be responsible at least for a couple of murders that are now called the Colonial Parkway murders. All right, let's move on to this. Steve Pankey. I have like 6 letters from him. And I think we just have to remember that he's writing these things, of course, you can see here on paper. And it gets a little repetitive after a while. I don't know if he forgets what he's written. Is he losing his memory or something? I really don't know. But some of these letters, I wouldn't say they're necessarily word for word copies, but it does feel like that. It's like the same topics, but the topics are just like moved around. And I'm not going to get into things that we've already talked about before. What he did say in one letter that was dated June 6th, that he says that he's in the appeals process. And right now, who's working with him and who's doing this, he has not said in any of these letters. So maybe he's lying about that, which of course is always possible. But he says he's in the appeal process. Now, you all should know that, I don't know, was it 2 weeks ago now? Maybe not quite 2 weeks, but at least a week and a half ago, I did email his first lawyer, Anthony Vjorst, asking him about discovery materials and things, and he never did get back to me. So I'm trying to think that he's not rude. Maybe he's on vacation. Maybe he's working on a big case or something. I'm keeping hopes that he's not being rude to me and just blowing me off. I don't think I've given him any reason to do that. So maybe before the week is over, I will email him again following up to see if he got my first email that I sent him, where I had some questions about the discovery materials from the trial. If he responds, I'll let you know. So that was it. The particular, just like I said, a lot of the stuff he's written before, so I'm not going to go through it. One of the other things he brought up was that, not in, once again, more copy stuff. He did bring up somehow he knew or knows. I don't know if you've seen this. It's never been on a live show agenda yet, but I have read about it. Maybe I should put it on the agenda. Maybe I can bring it up next week. is that there is a medical examiner or somebody in the coroner's office or somebody having to do with forensics in Colorado. And this woman has been discovered to have, where does it say here? Not in this letter. Seems to have lied about what she was discovering in some of these cases. So let me see where he wrote that. It's not in that letter, but somehow he knows about this. So he must have the opportunity to read the news. Is he getting, of course, he doesn't have access to the internet. I realize newspapers like the paper type are on their way out. Is that how he's finding about some of these things? Did his lawyer tell you? I don't know. But where did he write that? Not in this one. Now that I'm yeah, here we go. All right, so here's what he wrote about no, this isn't it there. Come on now, Ed. Oh, here it is. It's very short. Recently, he wrote in this letter dated June 8th. Recently, the Denver Post reported FBI tech Missy Woods falsified evidence in many cases. So, and then he brings up, is there a possibility that she worked on Janelle's case? I really don't know one way or the other. But I think we have to remember something. There was no forensic evidence for Steve Pankey's case. There was no, all we know that there was a bullet hole in there. And I will tell you, Steve has his own theory about that I'm not going to get into. But we have to remember something. He's bringing it up, but there was no forensic evidence presented in either trial. No DNA, no fingerprints, nothing. So it very well may be that, and this is true. What he's writing here is true, and you can look that up. This woman, Missy Woods, she's under investigation now for not doing her job the way she should be doing it. And I just imagine a bunch of prosecutors in the state of Colorado are now saying, oh my gosh, what are we going to have to do here? And it's interesting, this being that I've seen every episode of Law and Order, I think they used that as a plot in at least 2 of the episodes. The one I'm thinking of is having to do with fingerprints. And a guy was sent to jail on the strength of what this woman said about fingerprints matching. And then years later, it was discovered somehow with better science that somebody else did it. And they went back to ask this woman, well, looking at the fingerprints, how did you even, they looked at the fingerprints of the person who eventually went to jail wrongly, and the fingerprints she looked at, and you could tell they weren't any the same. How could you even make this mistake? And then, what is her name? I forget. I know that she's played by Patha Murkison, but her character knew this woman well. And she's like, how could you do this? And the woman kind of took an attitude at that point. You police are always pressing us, pushing the boundaries and what's legal. And we just have to make sure that these fingerprints, because we got this case to solve and everything. And eventually in the show, this woman did end up going to jail, but in the process, of course, created a huge headache for the DA's office. And I can't remember who was playing the DA. Was it Wiest, or was it Fred Thompson, or was it to the point where Sam Waterston went from just a district, it went from a prosecutor to the actual district attorney? It was somewhere. It was later in the run, I think, of Law and Order. Maybe some of you can remember that. But that's kind of when I think of when I've seen this story about this woman in Colorado who seemingly was not doing her. And, it's hard for me to tell right now, though, whether she was skewing things. I guess she probably was skewing things in favor of the prosecution. Maybe not. Maybe she was trying to help criminals get away. I don't know. But either way, got to be a huge headache out there. But Steve brought it up, so he knows about it. And he's, he may be thinking that could she have done work for the Janelle Matthews trial? I don't know how she could have. Because like I said, there was no scientific evidence that proves Steve killed Janelle. I'm going to keep saying that. Stephanie says, when did he start writing these letters to you and what prompted it? I actually started writing him first, Stephanie. And it was actually right about a year ago that I started doing that. Why, when I started writing letters to him and he got back to me fairly quickly. And it's gotten to the point where I send him one letter, he sends me 5, which nobody should be surprised by that, given that how much Steve likes to talk. What prompted it for me is that there's still a lot of questions about Steve's conviction to me. I will continue to state he very well may have killed Janelle Matthews, but certainly the prosecution did not prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. In my opinion, even though I was part of the prosecution twice, that the prosecution left the door open to a lot of people, men and women, being capable of killing Janelle. Because there's no scientific evidence that put Steve on the street, in the house, in the driveway. They never could show why he would ever been on that street. They could never prove that he even knew Janelle Matthews' family existed or Janelle existed or anything like that. The only connection that they could find that went kind of a line, kind of like that 6 degrees of separation for Kevin Bacon game, is that Steve used to work with Russ Ross, and Russ Ross drove Janelle home that evening, of course, with Russ Ross's daughter in the car as well. That is the only connection that could be made between Steve and Janelle. It's certainly interesting. It certainly gets everybody's attention. But I would say, on the other hand, that although we have 7 billion people on this planet, we're really not that disconnected from each other as we might think. For example, I'll give you a perfect example of this. Although I have not spoken to this guy in a long time, I'm only one person away from Tom Cruise. I've never met Tom Cruise. I don't ever hope to meet Tom Cruise. Maybe if you ever, I'm not a Scientologist, but the Scientologist Capitol building is right over here in Clearwater. I can see it from this side of the building. The only way I would ever maybe run into Tom Cruise if he was coming down to the building and I was in downtown Clearwater for some reason. But I'm only one person away from Tom Cruise, because when I was doing my filmmaking in Las Vegas, I got to know a guy who produced at least 2 of Tom Cruise's movies, Minority Report and oh my goodness, what is the name of the other movie? I can't believe I'm blanking out on it right now. But I got to know this guy fairly well. His name is Gerald Mullen. He won the Academy Award as a producer for Schindler's List. I've not spoken to him in 15 years, just to be clear. I think he's still alive. But I got to know him fairly well, and he was friends with Tom Cruise. I don't know Tom Cruise. Never met him. But that just shows you the world maybe isn't as big as we think. So when it comes to Steve Panking knowing Russ Ross and then Russ Ross driving Janelle Matthews home, that's certainly not as crazy as me being one person away from Tom Cruise. But I've never met Tom Cruise. I don't know him. So just because Steve Panking knew Russ Ross, and I know they didn't get along, doesn't mean he had anything to do with Janelle Matthews' murder. So these are the things. And so the reason I'm writing him is I'm continuing to explore this, Stephanie. Of course, if he's guilty, I'm hoping Steve's going to make a mistake one of these days and say something that was not in the trials that can actually be factually pursued. That's what I'm hoping. On the other hand, I'm keeping my mind open to the idea that Steve didn't do this. And well, how then would you go about trying to figure out who did kill her? And of course, Nora Strike is a very good candidate. Lived right across the street. I know prosecution didn't think of much of it, but one of their own investigators admitted under oath that he never could rule Nora Strike out. So we have all of this. So this is what motivated me, Stephanie. Why Steve wrote back to me. He's Steve Pank. He likes to talk. He likes to write. And he likes the attention and everything else. So one more thing, in one of these letters, he compared himself to Richard Jewell. This was the guy who was originally charged with the Olympic bombing in Atlanta in 1996 and how the FBI went after him. And of course, they eventually figured out that Richard Jewell had nothing to do with it. In fact, he was a hero in those circumstances. And it ended up being this crazy psycho guy who did it. And he was eventually caught quite by accident. The cop who caught him didn't even know who the guy was when it happened, if you want to look that up. So in one of these letters, Steve compares himself to Richard Jewell, somebody who was falsely accused. They really went after him. And it turned out the FBI and all the police were wrong. So everything else pretty much in these letters he wrote to me is kind of, I'm innocent. This person lied. Make sure you talk to the TV production people, things that he has written about before. Stephanie, you're very welcome. Thank you for asking. So anything else that I think I need to touch upon before we get to this Friday's episode? Sherri Papini, the found jet, the solved murders in the Shenandoah National Park. I don't think I'm going to get to this story. Darren Berg, maybe you want to look him up. He's a guy who walked away from a minimum security prison some years ago, and I kind of was in a millionaire. It was all fake. He lied to get all that money and everything, but he escaped, and he might be in Brazil now. Kind of just caught my attention as I was doing my daily missing persons reading. So maybe you want to look that up. He does have his own page on Wikipedia if you want to check it out. Darren Berg, B-E-R-G. All right, let's go to this Friday's disappearance. This one is a little more, I'll just say mysterious, a lot more to consider on this disappearance than we had this past Friday with Valerie Ingervai. At least that's the way I see it. You may think otherwise. We're going to be covering the disappearance of Clinton Thomas Sr. He does have a son, Jr., who actually is one of the guests. Clinton Thomas Sr. and two of his children, Mary and Clinton Jr., are the guests. I interviewed them just a few days ago. And he went missing on August 4th of 2018 in Waukesha, Oklahoma. That's Weleetka, Oklahoma. And this is a disappearance that is rich in different town names. So you're going to have to pay attention a little bit. The audio is good, but the town names we talk about, what is it? Dustin, Weleetka. I mean, some of these names, as you know, Oklahoma has a lot of Native American names. So you're going to have to pay a little bit of attention there to this. And I am going to do a map video. What happened was Clinton Thomas's truck was found in the parking lot of a church in the middle of Waukesha, Oklahoma. It sat there for a week before anybody figured out what was going on. Even though people knew he was missing, the police department's office were 3 blocks away, and they were supposed to be looking for him, and his truck had been sitting in this church parking lot the whole time. When we talk about problems with police and investigations, you're going to hear about it. But also, the big question here is on August 4th, he was getting together with a guy. He was like in the trading cars business. And Clinton had a dune buggy that he wanted to trade with this other guy for a Jeep. And somehow this other guy ended up having Clinton's dune buggy, but the guy also still had his own Jeep and never did explain why he kept it, even though Clinton was missing. You'd think a good person would just say, yeah, you're Clinton's family, take this Jeep, and we hope you find Clinton. The guy decided to keep the Jeep. So that is Clinton Thomas Sr. This is a disappearance that is not on the Charlie Project, and I don't think it's on NamUs either. And I want to credit Assistant Emily for reaching out to Clinton's family. And both Mary and Clinton Jr. did spectacular interviews, and you will hear them this Friday. So you can't go to the Charlie Project to kind of do a study on this. You're actually going to have to find news articles, and there are many. For Clinton Thomas Sr., August 4th, 2018, from Weleetka, Weleetka, Oklahoma. A lot to consider in this disappearance, I'm here to tell you. So that's all I have for you tonight. I thought this was a spectacular show. I know I'm a little biased, but do not forget, before you leave, please give this video a thumbs up, the show a thumbs up, subscribe, like, share, consider going to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast to contribute, or hit the join button below if you're watching on YouTube. And you will hear me on Friday as I do my interviews with Mary and Clinton Jr. for Clinton Sr.'s disappearance. I hope you all have a beautiful week. Keep your heads on swivels out there. Charlie, say hi to the kids for me. Sherri, thank you for keeping me updated on what's going on with this Caleb Harris situation. Thank you for moderating tonight. I hope you're doing well, Sherri. Good night.